Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this press conference releasing the Mayor's Statement on Financing Nature for Sustainable Cities and Regions, organized by the Cities Unit of the Economy Division of UNEP. And I would like now to ask Sharon Gill, the head of that unit, to introduce our panel.
Thank you very much, Terry. Good morning, everyone. I won't keep too much of the time, but I just want to say that we're here to really acknowledge the actions that cities are doing. A lot of the cities that are here with us, the 3 cities that are here with us today are champions of the work around nature. They are building urban forests, green belts, water streams and parks to achieve cooler temperatures, cleaner water and air, reduced water runoff, reducing soil erosion, enhancing social connections, active living, recreation. There are multiple benefits to bringing nature into our cities. But to unleash the power of nature and achieve the goals of the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration, we need to significantly grow investments to protect and restore nature in cities and regions. We in UNEP in the UN Environment Program, we're very happy to support cities and to reinforce the call for increasing recognition of their role in addressing the triple planetary crisis. I'm very pleased to introduce our distinguished panel today. Just one second, so that I get all. We have Mayor Jaime Pumarejo Hines, the Mayor of Barranquilla, to my left after Terry. We have Dr. Marina Robles Garcia, the Secretary of Environment of Mexico City. We have Christoph Nejdovki, Deputy Mayor of Paris, who is leading the work on urban vegetation, green spaces, biodiversity, and animal welfare. I live in Paris, so I have him to thank for all of the green stuff that's happening in our city. And of course, last but not least, we will hear from Kobe Brand, Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI and Global Director of ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center. Back to you, Terry.
Well, thank you very much. I'd now like to ask the Mayor of Barranquilla for some opening remarks, please.
Well, first of all, I would just like to say that it's appreciated that we're taking more and more into account in these forums, and I think ICLEI has a lot to do with that. In a sense, we just want to bring the voice of mayors around the world to the forefront and to, I guess, make sure that the necessities of cities are taken into account in these important conversations. The most important thing is we are acting on climate change in the forefront. Every day, we see the effects of climate change, and we see our citizens asking us for more action. Our barrier is, of course, financing. And we are seeing that lack of financing for cities is hindering the ability to adapt to climate change, to preserve biodiversity, to enable us to finance nature-based solutions. So in cities like Barranquilla and 100 more in Latin America, we have created a network called the Network of Biodiversities. It is a network that started a year ago in Barranquilla, and today, 1 year later, we have 100 strong. We are 100 strong cities in Latin America, ranging from Ushuaia to Central America. And what we're trying to do is show the world that Colombia, Barranquilla, and cities like us need to preserve our biodiversity and use it going forward, not only to fight against climate change, but also to fuel the next revolution of science, technology, and knowledge. And to do that, we need help. And that help comes in terms of finance. So we support this initiative, and we strongly ask the communities of the world to get in this boat, which clearly needs a lot of support and a lot of financing.
Thank you very much. And, now turn it over to Christophe Najdowski, the Deputy Mayor of Paris, Urban Vegetation, Green Spaces, Biodiversity, and Animal Welfare.
Thank you very much. So, hi, I'm Christophe Najdowski. I'm Deputy Mayor of Paris in charge of green spaces and biodiversity. We, as citizens and also as decision makers in our cities or local governments, are facing the same questions and the same situation. We see the collapse of biodiversity and nature today. But we want, and the citizens want also to live in resilient cities. And we as local decision makers are on the front line of these changes. Our cities and our regions have been artificialized these last decades. The nature and environment has been neglected, but we form a whole with our environment. We are interdependent also with the other species. So the collapse of biodiversity is also the collapse of our societies and the human societies also. So now it's time to act. We need to transform our territories to meet the challenges of biodiversity and also, of course, of climate change. It is one of our main concerns for a long time in Paris. For example, we are no longer using pesticides 20 years ago in our city, so it gives also some results and good results for the fauna and the flora already. So we have been advocating also to this to not use any more chemicals in local policies for green spaces, and we call also the other cities and subnational governments to do so. We have some different plans for biodiversity, for urban planning. We have a plan, a strategy now for trees also, to plant trees and to give more green spaces in our cities. So we are trying to develop, to have a new development model in our cities where nature unfolds wherever possible. We need to put vegetation, to adapt to climate change, to plant trees wherever we can, on the streets, on the walls, on the roofs, everywhere it's possible. We also work with the citizens. We have a lot of community gardens. We give bird houses to citizens for the sparrows that are to strengthen the colonies of weakened sparrows to keep these species in our cities. We have participatory revegetation on the streets with the citizens. So the citizens are also ready to work with our local governments. But we can't act alone. Even if our cities are taking action today, for a real change to be made, we need a strong and global commitment. This is our role today, I think, both at this table at the 15th COP of biodiversity, to call for that change. So on the behalf of the city of Paris and her mayor, Anne Hidalgo, I invite all local authorities to join this call so that concrete financial aid is deployed to take local action against climate disruption, to preserve biodiversity and to restore ecosystems. So together, we call on national governments today and international decision makers. We call financial groups and private sector partners to increase all their efforts and join forces to give back to nature. We all need to become now the architects of a structural change. We need to step up collectively to take over from citizen initiatives and at our level to rethink infrastructures and financial systems in favor of nature-based solutions. We are ready. So I hope that also the national and the international governments will help us for that change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Marina Robles Garcia is the Secretary of the Environment for Mexico City, and the floor is yours.
Sorry, thank you, Jaime. I'm going to speak in my natal language. Soy Marina Robles, soy la secretaria del Medio Ambiente de la Ciudad de México.
I am Marina Robles, the Secretary of the Environment of Mexico City, one of the largest cities on this planet. In the 80s and in the early 90s, Mexico City was considered to be one of the world's most contaminated cities. One of the cities that experienced that level of deterioration due to years inactions of unsustainable management of nature and natural resources. Mexico City hosts approximately 14 or 15 million people that either reside or use the city of Mexico. And that has very strong implications on the deterioration caused by that usage. Accordingly, in Mexico City, under our local administration, we have assumed a very strong, open, and express commitment, as I'm going to explain right now, through nature-based solutions, a commitment that includes opening up our doors to nature, letting nature into every urban area in the city, rather than see that as we see scenography around the cities. We want nature to be pervasive, to be embedded once again in our daily lives. In Mexico City, one of the ways this commitment has been reflected and this call that we're making on every local government, national government, financial institutions to support our actions through financing in order to preserve that biodiversity and through the creation of different projects consisting of nature-based solutions. We see that reflecting in historic investment that was made in Mexico City over the last 4 years in the amount of approximately 360 million US dollars that has allowed us to recover, for instance, in the food chain, the number of bird species, where we moved from having 350 registered bird species to 392. That is 42 new bird species. That says that our nature-based solutions are being successfully, are bearing fruit. And that has to do with the fact that we planted 34 million plants throughout the different areas of the cities, seeking to restore balance to a city that over the years had suffered a huge imbalance in terms of availability and access to green areas. We've created 16 new large spaces, large green spaces that resulted in 1,500 new green hectares in the least favored areas. We've also set up 800 gardens for pollinizers, and that also has to do with the huge outcomes that we've had in the number of species. We've built 33 wetland systems that have also allowed to recover gradually one of the characteristic systems of our city by integrating and increasing the number of native species, and thus allowing to recover 76% of the abandoned areas of the city, and allowing us to cut down over 2 million CO2 equivalent tons that led us to meet 84% of the goal that we set up in terms of CO2 emission reduction. We do understand that this call to create better conditions for financing, to invest in nature based solutions, favors every one of us, and it also favors the conditions for investment in the cities, tourism, security and safety. It reduces violence and it improves people's living conditions. That is why we are truly convinced that this call must be taken as seriously as required, because it will never be possible to build and to work for global solutions if we are not working on local solutions, on solutions that will allow us to guarantee a future for our city, to guarantee a future for the people that are living directly in every one of the cities, in every one of our peoples, in every one of our districts. Thank you very much.
Kobe, I think.
Kobe Brandt, sorry. Deputy Secretary General of ICLE and the Regional Director of ICLE Africa.
Thank you very much, and what a delight to be here with UNEP, our friends and colleagues for many years on the agenda of both cities and also climate change, but also very much nature and biodiversity. Thank you, UNEP. And what a wonderful honor it is to sit with so many of our ICLE members here in these halls on this table, talking about the need to finance at the local level. We know and we all hope that there will be a strong global biodiversity framework agreed to here by the parties, and we wish them all the ambition and strength and perseverance they need to see these 2 weeks through and leave the planet on a more sustainable trajectory, one that restores humanity's peace with nature. It cannot happen, and the GBF cannot be implemented if it is not also in the urban context. For a long, long time, people thought and built and shaped cities in a way thinking that nature is out there. We push nature outside of the boundaries of cities. But now, over the last decade plus, the last 15 years plus, some cities longer, we have seen that people actually desire nature around them. We cannot separate ourselves from nature in an urban environment. And we have award-winning cities here on this table. And please, I urge you, also to the press, please join us at our Cities Summit, the 7th Subnational and Cities Summit that will take place here, one floor up, tomorrow and the day thereafter, where cities and regions from around the world will talk to the parties and yourselves about the need for financing and the ability that cities have, the unique ability cities have to act and implement. What Paris is doing, what Mexico City is doing, what so many other cities around the world, large and small, are doing for nature is laudable, but we still need to upscale it in many, many ways. And yes, I'm going to talk about 1 or 2, 3 things that we can do, but let us start with the city. Let us start and say that yes, we have homework to do ourselves as cities. We need to rethink how we value nature. We need to rethink how we budget for nature. Do you know that some cities and regions have very large economies? And those economies do not necessarily budget around the possibility of bringing urban spaces back into our cities, of embracing nature on our rooftops, of bringing food systems closer to the people. Large urban parks are possible. We see this around the world. Even small urban parks can provide a community with a necessity that actually is proven to bring violence down in parts of the world where I live, in Africa, but also to bring health and well-being up. And never a time more did we see this than during the peak of COVID, when some of us were locked up in confined spaces, in small apartments, away from nature. We missed it. And the studies are still out there by the health community to understand what it did to the psyche of our urban community. And let's remember, more than half of the world already live in cities, and that number is going to increase a lot into the future in different parts of the world. So we, in many instances, are still building the cities of tomorrow. Some cities are expanding at a rate where they are doubling in size in less than a decade. We have a choice. We can do it with nature, or we can keep pushing nature out. It's much more difficult to turn hard concrete infrastructure up, move it out, and return natural ecosystems. It's possible, and it's happening. And there are many wonderful examples. Think of Seoul. Think of what's happening all over many places in Europe at the moment. But it's harder than to just start planning from the outset and build your city with nature, making enough recreational green corridors, green and blue spaces. We know Target 14 has no brackets in it. Yes, we need more targets like this with no brackets in it that really actually drive action at the local level. But how do we finance it? We start with cities. We need more cities to think like the cities on this table, who understand they need to start by themselves, that they can do a lot by planning and budgeting for, in a small local context, by bringing nature home. And then I'd like to say we cannot do this alone. We need to do it in a multi-level governance context, where we need to work with bankable projects coming from cities that talk to the private sector and the donors to make them understand it makes common sense and it can make them money. It can be profitable to invest in nature. So we need to work with both cities, but also the provincial governments, other levels of subnational government, states like California, etc., who are coming into regions with nature and cities with nature as global initiatives. But we also need nations. So within a national government, there's a lot of funding available. But is the funding flowing into nature-based solutions? Is the funding flowing into local action for biodiversity, as it should? If it's not, then we need to look inward and say, let's make the argument better. Let's make the argument stronger. Let's work with the private sector to understand their language, to understand what will make it bankable and investable for them to bank into and invest into nature. And in order to do that, we need the scientific community. We need science, IP-based, IP-based, and other processes to inform us on why it makes common sense to design with nature. Singapore is a great example. Paris, many others are great examples, but we need to mainstream it into hundreds of thousands of smaller cities and towns around the world. And we can do it. We have the answers. There are networks where we partner with UNEP and many others, like Cities with Nature, which is an open community where cities learn and share and inspire each other, but they also work with the scientific sector, they work with the private sector, they work with financiers. We need also the financiers to step out of their comfort zone then and come and listen to the realities of cities and understand that we need to take more risk, when we need to be a little bit more have a little bit more of an appetite for risk in order to invest in nature, because the cost of not investing in nature in and around our cities, we know, is far higher than the cost of not investing in nature. And we get those tipping points that we can't turn around again. So we call on the finance community, private sector, the donor community, DFIs around the world, come, let's step out of our collective comfort zone and think about how we can bring nature right back into our cities, for nature, for biodiversity, but also for humanity. Humanity has an urban future, most of us. And it's up to us to decide what that quality of life is going to be that in our cities. And the financiers and the bankers who may be listening in today, you also live in cities. Think of the city you want to live in. Let's build it together. Let's follow examples of the sterling examples that we find out there. And let's create a momentum and a drive. Come to the City Summit. UNEP is a partner to the City Summit. Quebec, Montreal, they are the co-hosts of this summit, together with the city of Kunming, government of China, government of Canada. Be there with all these cities. Listen to every announcement that they're going to make there. They are ready. They are so ready to work with national governments to implement a strong global biodiversity framework with finance mechanisms that also work in an urban context. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to remind any journalists who have joined us online that questions may be posted at any time via the on the YouTube website. And I believe we have some people ready to pass microphones in the room if anybody has any questions. Very quiet group.
Saturday afternoon.
Would you like to, could I ask perhaps for some reactions to what's been said by the panel, from the panel, please?
I think, in a sense, and trying to wrap this up, we all agree. We live and we have the same priorities as mayors, as local governments, is that we are seeing what climate change causes. But another thing that maybe we don't talk about enough is that more than 75% of, for example, Latin American population lives in cities. So it is there that we have to act. First, to educate our people to understand that climate change is real, that things are happening, that we need to change, and that our actions have repercussions. Because oddly enough, there are people that still do not understand that this is happening and that their actions have very dire and direct consequences on our environment. Secondly, to educate them that biodiversity is the path going forward, that we will be able to create science, jobs, and quality of life because of it. And that if we don't preserve it, our quality of life and the way we see our future is going to look very different. And it's going to go into survival mode instead of enjoyable mode. So, in a sense, I think that one of the things that we need to finance and look at is how can we finance education into biodiversity preservation and augmentation, and also climate change action. So that is something that we also need to look at from cities, and we don't do that enough. And secondly, as the rest of the panel was saying, is the things that we do, for example, in Colombia, in Barranquilla, is climate change adaptation. And that is a direct result of climate inaction during the last couple of decades. We are paying the price. So cities like Barranquilla, which have a lot of challenges and don't have enough money to finance those challenges, need help, because our collective inaction has driven a lot of these poor, migrant, and vulnerable neighborhoods and territories to need our help. If we don't cut loose the bureaucratic ties and the old ways of thinking, we're going to be too late in helping these people adapt to climate change. And we're going to rue the day that we didn't act quickly. And as I always say, the world is not going to end. It's going to keep going. We're just not going to be here if we don't act quickly enough.
Thank you very much. Let me call on Sharon Gill, who is the head of the cities unit at UNEP in Paris, for some comments, please.
Just to tell everybody that on behalf of UNEP, we would like to thank our 15 champion mayors and cities from around the world that are launching this call. I would like to thank especially our panelists today for relaying the message on behalf of the 15 cities and for joining us. We are proud to support this call alongside ICLE, C40, the World Economic Forum, WRI, the Global Environment Facility, climate policy initiatives, CCFLA, and the University of Pennsylvania. And I'm quite sure that we will have more partners working with our cities in the future. To help cities to increase action for nature and contribute to the UN Decade on Ecosystems Restoration, UNEP is launching a new project funded by the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. In the next 3 years, this project called Generation Restoration will inform, inspire, and enable policymakers, practitioners, businesses, and finance institutions to promote and accelerate ecosystem restoration in cities. We will continue advocating for cities and regions to engage in international processes and to be included in financing discussions. So we're really looking forward to working with all of the cities that are here on this panel and to those of you who would be interested in this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thanks to our panel, and thanks to everybody who's joined us here in the room and online. Thank you very much.